What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Today, I'm just going to share with you some different things going on in the fractional real estate space. All of them are just sort of little pieces of news or things happening, and I don't think are enough for a full video. But I think every once in a while I like to do this collection of things, especially when there's something that I just want to get out there quickly. Some of this stuff I'm sure is not news to all of you, but might be to some. So first, there's a new Mogul property launched. I'm going to try to do due diligence video on this one in the next 24 plus or minus hours. They haven't sold out too much yet. 37,000 raised out of 260 total. It's another pad split in Mesa, Arizona. I'm sure I'm going to say a lot of the same things about it, but I'm still going to dig into it, do a video, and see what we've got there. I also wanted to make sure everybody knows about Mogul's live stream or their webinar coming up on Thursday. If you haven't been participating in these, you really need to be. They're very open about answering questions. They always have announcements or property drops, but this one especially, they've promised their biggest announcement yet. I've had a couple DM discussions with people about what these might be, and I think even some people jumped in the Discord and talked about it. I'm not sure. Before I forget, please like and subscribe. In the description of this video, I have links to all the places where I'm currently investing in fractional real estate online. Please feel free to use any of those links. Some of them you might get some free money with your initial investment, but read the terms and services, do your own due diligence on the platforms and on the properties. I'm just putting those there for your convenience, not necessarily recommending them for anybody's specific situation. As always, you want to do your own due diligence on anything I talk about on here. And we're going to have a good example of one reason why, right? Just because I buy something doesn't mean it's necessarily a platform that's going to work. Also in the description of this video, I have a link to that Discord that I just mentioned. Please feel free to join. It's not a sales funnel. It doesn't cost anything. Just creating a space for us to talk about all different things going on in the fractional real estate world. Almost all of the news that I am getting now about fractional real estate comes from someone in the community sending me a DM or posting something in there, before I even get a chance to see it out in the world. And so that's exactly what I'm looking for, that we're all helping each other, sharing ideas, sharing news, sharing strategies. I think it's helpful. So anyway, in that Discord, there was some speculation about what this big announcement might be. Is it their secondary markets coming sooner? Is it they're going to have a margin product so we can lever our position even though they're already levered deals? Or is it going to be, are they going to launch a larger multifamily property or something like that? That would be a big property, so it'd be a big announcement. If you have any guesses, feel free to put it in the comments or jump in the Discord and let's talk about it. Or as a lot of people just feel free to keep DMing me. But as much as possible, I try to move discussions into the Discord because I want everybody to hear about everything going on. I don't like, there's some people in our community that think they want to have inside info, and I always want to have every discussion in public as much as possible. Especially when it comes, when it has to do with, if it's not just your personal investment strategy, right? But if it's something that's going on with a property that, like on Lofty, if we're going to vote on it, I want to have all those discussions out in the open. If it's, my thoughts on platforms, I'm not going to tell you something different in private than what I'm willing to put out publicly. So all of that, I think, is useful to just get out there. Okay, but anyway, yeah, if you have guesses, I'd love to hear them. We're only a day and a half away, so we'll find out soon enough, or maybe 2 days away. What day is it today? Tuesday night? Yeah, and that's going to be Thursday night. So yeah, 2 days away. That's exciting. Less than that. Okay, so one of the big pieces of news today, Solslot, and thank you, Brad, for bringing this to my attention. He's one of our Discord members. He's very active in the Mogul thread, especially, but he was pretty interested in Solslot. This is really disappointing news to me. They sold their technology to pinksurfing.com, and they're transitioning to just doing that populist.co business model. And then I guess they kept a perpetual license so that they can, fulfill all the DACs that are remaining. So that was my first question, like how does that impact our current owners? But if you watch any of my videos, I was really bullish on Solslot. I think this is a business model that the world needs. I think there's a huge demand for it on the borrower side. I mean, it's not loans, but the people in the position, the people that need the capital. I think there's a huge demand for it, and I think it's a really smart solution. So I'm really disappointed that Matt isn't continuing along with this this in the same way. I think he's just more excited about the Populous project, and I understand why. I think for some people it could be really exciting. But anyway, so he I still have ownership in 3 DACs, one of which I know the property closed, but we haven't gotten a redemption yet. He did address this in his Discord. I think Ike actually shared this link in our Discord, but we should get that redemption mid to end March. It's not great, but I'm just glad he's we're actually going to get paid for that. There's a refinance underway on Rangoon, and the appraisal came in fine, and so. With that payoff being ordered, I think that's how we're getting paid out. So then a redemption should come with that. And then Jenkins, it sounds like there's going to be a refinance there as well. And I think they're saying that's in progress. This is not a word I know. I think that's just in progress. And so it sounds like if you have money on Solslot in one of the remaining DACs, like I do, you should get paid off hopefully sometime in the next, by the end of April, May. Sometime not too far in the future, which is fantastic, right? I mean, as long as I actually get that money back, this is one of the reasons why I'm always telling you I'm experimenting with these sites. Most of these sites are a work in progress. What's interesting to me about this one is I don't really understand what happened, right? And I'd love to hear about like why why they didn't just keep running with this model. Maybe it was tough. It doesn't seem like it was difficult for them to sell out. So maybe it was tough finding the homeowners that needed that capital, but that just seems really hard to me, hard to believe. Maybe there were some issues with the, with thinking about how this is going to work from a regulatory perspective, but it sounded like they really had that covered. So I'm not sure. One of my thoughts is it wasn't very much money per deal, right? And so this is a business that you'd have to have massive volume to be making a good amount of money as the owner of the project, right? As Matt in Solslot's shoes. So maybe that's what's going on. I mean, I'm just speculating. I don't know. I was really hoping to see this just take off. So if anybody is out there, I know lots of you guys are thinking about building platforms, talking about it. I think this space is really, I think on the demand side, on the people looking for capital, I think you can find those people all day, every day. I think you could plug into, start paying referral fees to realtors and to wholesalers and find just an unlimited number of deals, where they could use this capital, and then obviously be selective, make sure that they work. And it seems like there was demand on the investor side too. I mean, I know I was excited about this product. I don't know, maybe the capital turned out to be a little too expensive for the people, the homeowners. It didn't really seem like it to me though. It just seemed like such an elegant solution. And so I don't know, I'm kind of disappointed, but they sold the technology, he said, to this website, pinksurfing.com. I clicked on their real estate deals, and it looks like at the moment they're just selling whole properties. So, and there was just one in the residential real estate section. There was one in the commercial real estate section. Maybe this is going to be a way that they're, I don't know. When I click on their About Me on their website, and I just want to, they have their little About Me and oops, page not found. So I really don't know anything about this company, website, whatever it is. If you have any insight about that, I'd love to hear about it. because obviously if they're I was very excited about Solslot, in this particular business model. And if they're going to pick up the baton and carry it, I don't know what the metaphor is there, but if they're going to be the ones that keep going with this, obviously I want to pay attention. But at the same time, if there's other people that want to jump in and do this same sort of thing, I'd love to talk to you about that. If you're already working on platforms and this seems like a space, if you want to try to understand a little bit more why I think there's so much potential here, happy to talk to anybody. Just like always, I mean, I know I've talked to a whole bunch of people who are at different stages of creating platforms, and so I don't know. I mean, I think I'm just pretty sad about it because it seems like a way that we could get great deals, and at the same time help a whole bunch of people. Yeah, I mean, to me, it strikes me that maybe it was an issue with not enough volume to make it a worthwhile project. But I don't know. Maybe we'll get. I have interviewed Matt a couple times. Maybe I'll get to talk to him again. But I mean, my sense just from even the last time I talked to him is he's just so much more excited about the Populous.co project. This is the big the property in Malibu. I think Malibu. Oh, this is interesting. This is different than it looked last time I was here. Oh, now we have a coming soon. That's really interesting. Okay. So I don't know. I don't know why that's changed. But anyway, I think he's just excited about that project, and that was hopefully much more profitable for him than this was, or I'm not really sure what the story is. So it'd be interesting if anyone has any insight and they want to share that. I'd love to hear about it. Yeah, but he is, he has said, she's launched on yeah, this is the one, right? This is the property here, Malibu, California. 7 million of DAX to accredited investors. So this is not really, I know, my audience, right? I mean, not most of you. I know some of you are accredited investors, but it seems like the majority are not. Anyway, that's all I have to say about Solslot. I got a couple different things going on with Lofty that I want to mention. So one, if you follow the Universal Lending DAO, we have our first vote out for what's essentially a new product. I think this property update date is wrong because I just got this vote today. I know we were talking about it the last couple of days, so I don't know how this is. It seems like maybe this is just an error as far as the date of that. But this is a different product. So in the past, the Universal Lending DAO has been lending directly to the DAOs. Pretty high interest rate, right? Like 13.5%. But I think it's a good reflection of the risk. It was really run terribly early on. They accidentally paid out too much principal, and so it looked like an amazing yield because they were paying out principal. But Lofty went back. They took a very long time and a lot of prodding from a little bit from me, a lot from Pleb. If you don't know who Pleb is, you don't spend enough time in our Discord. But finally got them to say, okay, yes, we did this stuff. It was wrong. They just came out of pocket to fix the issue, right, to put the cash back in. I already did a video on it. I didn't love the solution exactly because, a lot of us just wouldn't have even been in it if it hadn't had that yield that looked amazing, but it wasn't real. But anyway, I think their solution was fair enough. Better than a lot of the stuff, that I've come to expect anyway. But since then, Pleb has taken over as the, he's the authorized representative of that DAO. And he's been working on clearing up a lot of the old loans, trying to really vet new potential loans. And so this model, instead of loaning directly to the DAOs and having the ability to force the DAO to sell the property, in this instance, he's loaning proposing that we make a loan to one of the co-owners of the DAO. So it's 9 Country Club Lane. Noah is the person who brought that property to the platform, and it would be making a loan directly to NOAA, keeping that decently high rate. And I think, makes sense because it's a personal loan, and as collateral, taking tokens of 9 Country Club Lane. And if you read in the Discord, we had a big discussion about like how we should value those tokens. And I think that we luckily, for me, people came around to my way of thinking about it, that we really have to look at like the current market price. As a lender, we're kind of looking at this like a margin loan, right? And so we can't just say, well, what's the underlying property worth? Because we don't have the ability to force the sale of the underlying property. As a lender, if we ever had to, if we weren't getting paid, we'd have to liquidate the collateral. That would be the tokens. And so looking at what the token price is, what it's selling for, is what in my mind makes the most sense. It's what really models like a margin loan. Or even like mezzanine lending. So I've worked a lot in the lending space. I think I've talked about that on this channel. Mezzanine lending is there's a lot of different people use it for different ways, but typically when you have this is used a lot in commercial real estate. You have a first mortgage. That first mortgage says in the documents you can't have a second mortgage on this property. That would be, that would trigger an acceleration clause of this mortgage. And so people that want to borrow more money, sort of like a home equity loan against commercial real estate, because they can't lend a second against the property, they lend it against the borrower's interest in the LLC that owns the property. And that's very similar to what we're doing here, where it kind of is, it kind of isn't. But usually that type of lending is extremely expensive. It's looked at more like equity. And so I think that's one way that you could sort of look at this, except that in that case, again, if we were looking at it as mezzanine debt, the mezzanine lender has the ability unilaterally to take, to maybe through a court action or something, depending on how it is, to take control and force a sale of the property. Where again, if it's only a certain, a portion of the tokens, we couldn't do that here. And so I thought this looks the most like a margin loan. Even though tokens aren't securities, what we're getting is, a tradable interest that's backed by a property. But for a few different reasons, I think it only makes sense to value those as collateral as what we can actually sell them for. One, obviously, because of the liquidation value. The other is, there was a discussion. Well, no, it's if it's valued at whatever with the intrinsic value of the real estate. But then they were trying to do that, but then saying, well, but then we're gonna get 200 times the collateral. Well, I think that's just we're just sort of moving things back and forth in that way. But like if we were going to do it just sort of at a regular LTV, but give someone credit for the full value of the intrinsic value of the real estate, there's, one of the things is I'm not concerned so much about this loan, but I'm concerned about like, okay, we're creating a model for the universal lending DAO to spread this product across Lofty, right? Like anytime somebody has a large chunk of tokens and wants to borrow and the ULD has money, I'd love to see this happen a whole bunch, right? I think it could add liquidity to the platform in an interesting way. It makes it so that you don't necessarily just have to sell your token at a fire sale price if you need some cash. But anyway, getting back to the example, let's say tokens are currently trading at $20, but we wanted to value your collateral at $50 because that's what the underlying real estate is really worth. And just to make the example really easy, let's say we're just doing 80% LTV. And so at $50, 80% LTV would mean that you could borrow $40 per token. But the tokens currently just sell at $20. So I could take my token, give it to you to hold as collateral. You give me $40, which is 80% of the $50 value. I take 20 of those dollars, go buy a second token. Now I have all my tokens back because I only gave you one for collateral, and I have $20. And if I default, you just have the token that you could have just bought for $20 right now. That's the problem I see with that model, right? And I think that's why when, because it creates a situation where you basically have like this moral hazard, right? Where you have it's not even really that, but it's sort of a perverse incentive where you have like, you could attract bad actors that are trying to take advantage of this situation where they can borrow more against a property or against, a collateral than what it's worth. And I think the reason I'm really, sort of hyper aware of this, and when I worked in lending, I actually managed for a little while a portfolio of distressed mortgages, all of which were created during a time where there was a lot of new lending products, a lot of people. So I've seen the aftermath of people being creative, people being overly optimistic about collateral, and about the future, right? And so one of the things that one of the people who trained me in that business, she would say a lot is, as a lender, nothing ever gets better, right? The only direction, so like whatever our yield is on a loan, that's the most we're ever going to get. So the only things, any changes that we can experience are going to be worse for us. Now, just in case some of you are understand, credit quality and whatnot, and want to say, well, no, there's some instances where our mortgages might be worth more. Yes, it's kind of true, but these are sort of edge cases, and now I'm using some Jerry language, right? He's always talking about the edge cases, but that's sort of such a minority of situations that it's essentially true that as a lender, our yield is locked in day one, and the only types of changes we can experience are negative changes, which is why we don't care about things like, well, that property is really worth a lot more than what it's selling for today. That doesn't affect me as a lender. That doesn't help me at all, right? If it does turn out to be worth twice as much, I don't make any more money. And so it took me a long time to transition from the thought process of being an equity investor to being a debt investor or lender. But I think like just having that, and I think it's very true that the people that are good at one are not necessarily good at the other. Because when you're investing in equity, you need to train yourself to see the possibilities, right? To see the upside and to understand when you can take advantage of that. As a lender, you're doing the exact opposite. You have to only think about, okay, how can I get hurt? I don't care about if there's some upside to the property because I'm not getting paid anything extra because of it. And so because of that, it makes me, I think that training plus the experience of seeing just all these terrible mortgage products that like just, I dealt with hundreds and probably literally thousands of foreclosures in one of the roles that I had. And it, and a lot of them were on loans that people thought were safe at the time. They, for whatever reason, there was a lot of the early 2000s madness, right? And I think that it just really taught me like, okay, we have to value what's our collateral today. What happens if that collateral gets liquidated today? And really, and some of that discussion that was in the Discord is like, okay, well, really, if we had $15,000 worth of tokens in any of these properties, we couldn't actually liquidate them today without that, the price dropping to close to zero. And I think that's a decent argument for anybody who decides, oh, I don't like this model, right? But I think for most of the property, if we're doing a good job vetting the properties, I think that at a sufficient discount, somebody will step in and buy those. We might not be able to liquidate them today, but I think that over a short period of time, you could sell all these tokens for, we're talking about 9 Country Club Lane, and, now we're talking about, okay, valuing them at the current market price, $19.50. And giving them an 80% LTV. So, which, from a margin loan perspective, it's kind of a high, the way they do it is often like as low as 50%. But I think, margin loans are actually a lot cheaper. So we're getting sort of a risk adjusted higher rate here. But two, we have a little bit more, this isn't exactly a security either, right? And we have a little bit more, um, we can really understand the intrinsic value behind there that I think, going against everything I just said, maybe helps us a little bit, right? Um, anyway, I think that, like, for example, this particular one, if you were going to go and sell those tokens at a 20% discount because, we have 20% extra, and I don't know that math works exactly right. But if we were going to do that, I'd probably step in and buy a big chunk. And I know a bunch of other people would too, right? Now, obviously, so that counteracts that, well, there's not actually enough liquidity to do any of this. And then the other thing too is, okay, all of us investing on Lofty, although I have been moving my money off for a while, but if you're going to be in this ecosystem and you think you're going to be here long term, at some point we have to think about, okay, well, what if things actually get better, right? Like, if we're putting money here, we should be doing it. I mean, I think, well, I don't know, but I think we're doing it with the assumption that all these things will get better. And one of the biggest things that should change, or that needs to change to make it a system that works, is the liquidity, right? And I know that they're talking about combining all of the, the USDC side on all the liquidity pools. Obviously, if that happens, and I say if because, they talk about a lot of stuff that, a lot of it does eventually get rolled out, but the timing typically takes much longer. We're still waiting on a lending product. As far as I know, we're still waiting on working referral credits. I know I still have a $50 credit that doesn't seem to work. And some of these things were supposed to be done, 2024, they thought they were going to do it, and then early 2025, and then by end of year 2025, and then, okay, well, we're still waiting on it now. So all these things, they just take longer than I think than their team expects, and so then, longer than what they advise us on. But anyway, I want to talk about this because I think it's a really interesting product. I think if it starts to work out, I'd actually what I think would be one of the most interesting things is to see a peer-to-peer, like is for Lofty to actually just create a way for, okay, if you have tokens, you can put them up, you can say, okay, request a loan through the site, or maybe somebody could do this as like a offshoot. I mean, I guess that's kind of what CompX was doing with the vaults, but I think you could do it in a more a different way, where like each individual is, you're not interacting with a vault, like each individual is actually just making one specific loan, but you facilitate that. I don't know. I think that would be kind of really interesting because I like these type of loans, but I don't necessarily love that the ULD, is doing them. In addition, I like that they're doing them, but in addition to, it's a shift from what the DAO was originally doing, and I don't like whenever we have these business model shifts in the DAOs. This one is very different, right? It's not like somebody bought a property and now they have this crazy lending DAO. It was already a lending DAO, and now there's just been some changes in the way the lending takes place. So I don't know. Anyway, I think this is going to be good for us overall. Obviously, there's going to be some learning curve and how to implement it, how it works. If it's even, if people, I wanted to talk about this because I think this vote went out and there's probably people who don't really get the difference, right? That we're in a much different position. We can't force the sale of the property. We can only liquidate the tokens. Like we're just in a much different spot than the old loans. And so why is that important? Well, it changes our risk profile quite a bit. And also we have to think about how we're valuing the collateral differently. Because before, when we're making a loan to the DAOs themselves and we're actually looking to the property, well, then I don't care as much about the token price, right? My loan is against the property. And then we're looking at the LTV based on the property. And so that's a different situation. Anyway, just wanted to mention, because I think this is an interesting direction. Obviously, I'm sure there's a bunch of people that would like to use this to then go fund new projects that they could then bring onto Lofty. And that's one of the things that I think would be important, is that, this isn't just a way to borrow money to take your money off Lofty. it should be. We could do it that way, but I think there should be some strings attached to, okay, where's that money going? The plan is, oh, we're buying this next property, or something like that, right? We're doing, you really, because it's to the individual, not to the DAO, that would be the only real use case that I could think, or, people want to borrow to buy more tokens somewhere else, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was Max's announcements on Discord about Lofty. A lot of this stuff, some of it is stuff that Jerry talked about in this recent video. Most of it's good news. Earl's come to an agreement with Yom. That's Cal for a bunch of the properties. They're still being drafted though, so I don't know. But the plans have been active since February 1st. So I don't know exactly. Sometimes it's interesting to think, okay, how is it active if we don't actually have it drafted? Because that means all your terms are not completely worked out. But anyway, so those 4 Florida ones, which I think were the most problematic. And so then, okay, they're going to work on the other ones. I think this is great news, right? The whole Cal Yom situation has been just, a dark cloud hanging over Lofty's head for, just about a full year now is when it became pretty public, right? I think it was a problem a little bit before that, but I think it became really public around then. Having at least a path to that being done, I think is great. Now, how whole are investors going to be made from this? I don't really know. I think that I haven't looked into the actual deals. I'm sure Earl worked out the best possible deal that he could. He's pretty savvy when it comes to creating solutions for stuff like this. At the same time, keeping the other, our counterparty to their word is hopefully is not going to be too difficult, but I'm sure it's not going to be easy. And then coming up with solutions that work out for the rest of them. That it'll be fantastic. They also mentioned Brownfield, right? And that, the foreclosure was canceled and Alec and Chris are working on leasing up the property. Hopefully they can get somewhere with that, but a cancellation of a foreclosure isn't that big of a deal, right? A lot, like, you can just start it back up in the future. It is a good sign that, like, okay, the lender's not too interested in getting the property back. But one of the things that I think I would be very careful of, and I don't know if anybody's thought about this, but lenders, this is, especially lenders that are kind of in the loan to own business, will do something like this all the time. They'll be like, oh, these people are working hard, they're getting the property up and running. Let me just let them take care of that, get it to a better position, and then I'll foreclose, and then I'll have taken back a property that's running better than it is today, and I didn't spend the extra time and effort and money to get it to that position. And I think especially where there's missed payments and late fees and possibly penalties, in a situation like that, even if it's running as well as it could be, if it's not in a situation where you could go and just get another lender to take over, there's a risk that a lot of this work gets done and then, it still gets taken back. And that's, again, this is me always looking at the risk in situations, but also too, having just worked with a lot of, there's a lot of very shady lenders in the real estate industry, especially in this space where they are doing, either, lending on distressed situations, lending on, or buying properties and selling them with owner financing. Although I've done that plenty myself, there is definitely an ethical and an unethical way to do it. And, if you remember the original terms of the Brownfield loan, it seemed, well, if you were doing that same type of deal on a residential property, it would, I'm fairly certain, fall pretty squarely in the definition of a predatory loan. If you just look at like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau definition of predatory mortgages, which is, it's sort of like silly how tight their definition is in my mind. But anyway, so it was a loan that, I think they always understood that taking the property back or squeezing the borrower more was an option. Um, in any case, that's all I want to say about that. But it is good that it didn't get foreclosed on. So there's still some chance that they're going to recover some of their investment. What that looks like, I have no idea. But then this is the thing that I think is the most interesting. And Jerry mentioned some of these things in the video that he did, but so I'm going to talk about the top one last, though. So, okay, new properties are going to have a Discord channel open weeks before they launch, so we can start to vet sellers. I think that's fantastic. You can see that's already happening. I'd actually like to see us as a community come up with a list of questions that we just pose to every single new seller, right? Instead of like just sort of people jumping in and randomly asking questions, which is what we see happening right now. And I think some of that's good, right? We want to ask certain questions, but I think there's like certain underlying things that we want to find out every single time. And we should jump in the Discord. And as a group, we should work on, okay, what does that list look like? Let's, over time, we can refine it. But I think that's useful. Mortgage payments will always, for new launches, will always be paid directly from rent. This is something I've been talking about. This is the right answer. I mean, it just makes sense. No more rent credits. Again, I think that's the right answer. Like there's been so many games played with those two pieces. And we've seen just how it opens things up to bad actors and even just to people that are just overly optimistic and then couldn't get there, right? Like it's an issue. So I love that those two things are going to be rules going forward. No markup from the appraisal. So your par value of sale is going to be whatever your appraised value is. I think that makes a ton of sense as well. Just bringing deals to the platform at an above market price when you're already in addition charging fees on top of that never made sense to me. I complained about it every time. So I think that's fantastic. And then getting up-to-date utility bills to confirm that those are paid. That's just a very standard due diligence step. I'm glad that they're going to do that every time going forward. I think, again, as a community, we should have a checklist of things to make sure like all these things are part of the questions that we're asking and that we're, the documents that we're getting. And so, okay, back to new property, the top one here, new properties that they're launching. It's going to be launched by an authorized representative, someone like Earl, right? And they're going to charge a fee to do this. Basically a setup fee. I don't know why this is but moving so slowly. Maybe 10 tokens. So we're talking about like $500, right? And so if they're $50 tokens, about that, they're going to get paid that to set up the property page, review the inspections, appraisals, and launch details. So I think it's really good that we have someone, like this is the person it's their job to vet the property. Paying them in tokens, I think the idea maybe is that, okay, you're paying them in tokens instead of cash. So they have a little skin in the game. Although it's a very small amount, 10 tokens. Unless they're forced to hold those tokens for a certain period of time. I mean, it's just sort of a gimmick, right? Like, okay, just give them $500. I mean, what's the difference if they can just turn around and sell them instantly? But anyway, having somebody who's already a part of the community be responsible for, setting up the listing, making sure we're having info on there. It's interesting that they're saying, okay, he's going to review the inspections and the appraisal and the launch. What are they saying? Launch details and the launch details. Is he going to have some liability if that stuff is off because he was the one who was supposed to review it? My guess is no. I don't know that he necessarily has any duty to us as the investors. But I think it's a step in the right direction. If you've been watching my stuff for a while, I talked about what I think if Lofty really just wants to be a marketplace like the NASDAQ. One of the things that the NASDAQ uses is these third-party, basically market makers, who you have to have. I think to launch on the NASDAQ, you have to have 3 of these approved market makers that are willing to invest in your deal, in your stock, and they're basically the ones that are supporting, the trading price basically. But they're very large, institutions that do a ton of due diligence on those companies. And I think that really the only way that Lofty's ever going to be pretty safe as a marketplace is if there is somebody doing that same sort of work on here, right? And I think this is at least a good first step in that direction. We're saying, okay, we've got somebody, he's a member of the community, his reputation matters a little bit. We're going to pay him in tokens, although, like I said, unless he's forced to hold those tokens, the fact that they're tokens doesn't make a lot of sense, or doesn't really mean very much. But what I'd like to see is the only way you get on the platform is if you get a certain percent of an investment from somebody like Earl, right? Like maybe not specifically Earl, but like somebody who is, and these would be the quote unquote market makers, right? If you can't get, I don't know, some of the people that, have clearly have a good track record on the site making money, your first 10K or 50K or whatever it is has to be sold to one of, a list of individuals who has a track record of buying good deals, and maybe in exchange they get to buy them, maybe without their Lofty fee, because they're providing a service, essentially being the ones that are making a large investment, being willing to do a little bit more due diligence than your just average, person who's buying a token or two. That's what I'd really like to see. I think that sort of strategy could work, but I think. I just have to accept that Lofty is going to take very baby steps each time towards, they have to just see every problem actually happen in real life before they want to add a little bit more protection, right? It just feels like that's what we've seen over and over again, where, okay, we're just going to keep taking these baby steps and, creating situations where there's nobody really taking a hard look at the risks and whatnot. But again, I think this is, all of these changes I think are moves in the right direction. I think we're at least a couple years too late on some of these, right? But it is, they always like to talk about how, well, this stuff was obvious in hindsight, or in hindsight we shouldn't have done this. Well, I think, again, it's just a lack of industry experience, and most of these things were obvious problems from the get-go. But anyway, we're getting there. We're moving along, and I think, like I said, I think this is a good first step. I'd love to see there to be a little bit more teeth in this, like a little bit more. This person that is. Have somebody's, or either a person or a group of people that are actually vouching for this new deal coming to the platform, or at least, not guaranteeing it, not anything like that, but at least, having a trusted group that's looked at that deal and said, okay, we're willing to put our money in, that should be enough to if the seller of the property can't at least convince a certain portion of an approved list to invest, they shouldn't be able to just list it for anybody. That's sort of the system that happens on a lot of places like the NASDAQ, which I only use because Lofty calls themselves the NASDAQ of real estate. Well, yeah. Anyway, it's something like I said, I mentioned it before. I think it's obviously there's some hurdles to getting to there. You have to have people with capital that are willing to play that role. You have to come up with an incentive for them to be able to do it. I think, honestly, for someone like anybody who's qualified to really look through the deals and, vet them properly, is just not willing to do it for 10 property tokens, right? Like $500, maybe Earl will do it today, but I think he'll quickly realize that's not worth his time, right? If he hasn't already, it is, that's a big. It's one of the problems that you have with fractional real estate, right? Like um, it's why you need. I think one of the things is I think that the idea of you need larger investors that are willing to take the time and have enough skin in the game to do a full due diligence before the people who are just YOLOing $50 should be jumping into these things. And I think, maybe part of this gets helped by the fact that, they're getting rid of the 15% cap. But I'd love to see there be some sort of, I don't know, just vetting system in place, because it's really clear if you just look at all the old properties, how much sort of, whether it's intentional or not, deceptive information is on tons of the listings. I'm sure we'll have. I think this solution will create a better result than that, but I still don't think it gets us to the point of having an investment that I feel like is vetted and safe, right? I'm still going to be in a situation where I'm going to have to take a very long time digging into each one of these properties, in addition to the fact that somebody else did it to set it up. And the return on time on these deals is what I think is stopping a lot of serious investors from jumping into. I think it's what's made a lot of investors leave Lofty is it's not a great return on their time, right? And it's, if you're in a spot where you're not comfortable investing, and that's kind of what happened with me, right? Like I'm getting a good return on the small amount of money that I put in there. I was thinking I'd eventually, over the next year or two, put 10 times what I had originally invested on here, maybe more. But I don't feel safe on the platform. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting that much money on there. And if I'm not using the larger sums of money, well, then I'm not, it's not a good use of my time, spending all the time doing the due diligence on these individual deals and following all the votes and stuff that go on for each one and making decisions and coming up with solutions if I'm not going to own large chunks of each one. Anyway, that's I knew I'd get into a long rant on the Lofty stuff. That's why I saved it to the end. Hopefully, all this stuff, I guess I could have done just a video on this part because I've talked about it for a long time. But yeah, that's all the news that's going on in the fractional real estate space that I'm aware of. Anytime you hear anything about new platforms, changes in platforms, news that you think has anything to do with this, feel free to jump in the Discord, ping me in there. Put it in comments to any of the videos. I try to reply to every comment. And that's it. Yeah. Until next time. Is that it? I think that's everything I want to talk about today. So until next time, I'm going to just keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.